Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at SpunkyOldBroad1 or reach out to me on our website at SpunkyOldBroad.com. And now, back to the show. My guest today is Jackie Goldstein. Always in creative overdrive, Jackie's continued her curiosity and talents and contributed them to a wide variety of projects for a wide variety of clients in a wide variety of industries, with the end result being more strategic marketing, branding, creative, and communications. She was the art director of Turner Broadcasting and co-founded Galileo, a new media advertising marketing company. Currently, she helps Fortune 500 and startup companies alike as a creative director, designer, and copywriter for sales and marketing by helping them find the golden nuggets in their story. Being media fearless, she's worked with all print media, film, video, digital presentations, animation design, 3D displays, events, sets, point of sale, proposals, and promotions. She's attributed her success to the joy she brings to every assignment and the amazing people she's been lucky enough to work with. And she lives in Atlanta with her husband and two dogs. So welcome, Jackie. And I love you already because I love animals, and I'm glad you've got dogs. So tell me what you have.
Well, thank you. And I'm hoping that they stay polite during this interview. They're downstairs with my husband. So I'm just hoping that that's where they stay and we don't hear from them during this.
Well, I always hear from my cat. I have a Siamese cat who always has to meow in the middle of every interview. So, What kind of dogs do you have?
I have a Stella. She is just a one-of-a-kind from the pound. And I have a mini Schnauzer.
Oh, wow. What a great combination. Well, it sounds like you have had one exciting life and that you're still going strong. And since this is a show for women 50 plus, I love the fact that there are women over 50 who are doing such fabulous things and continue to do so. And you've had this interesting career path. So tell us a little bit about the biggest decisions that you've had to make along the way, because I'm sure there were many.
Yeah, there really were. I think probably one of the biggest decisions that I made was moving to Atlanta, because that set me on a course that I wouldn't have found probably in any other city. And I did that in my own peculiar way, which is kind of the way my whole life makes sense to no one but myself, in that I was living in Cleveland, Ohio after I graduated college, and I wanted to live in Toronto. So in order to do that, I had to get 2 years work experience to get a working visa. And I only had 1 year's work experience. So I decided to go somewhere for that 1 year work experience, and that's nearly 40 years ago. And that was Atlanta. So I came here for
Wow, and you ended up working at Turner, huh?
Yeah, I ended up working at Turner. I had been at WSB, which is the ABC affiliate prior to that, and had the opportunity to kind of get my feet wet in television and promotion for television and broadcast. And then I had the opportunity to work for Ted when it was really growing. I mean, we launched Headline News, we launched TNT, we bought the Turner MGM movie library. I did all the advertising for the sports teams and all the Turner properties. And I tell people that I used to be a tall blonde before I started at Turner. If you saw me, you'd know I'm 5 foot tall. Definitely not blonde.
So, but wow, what an exciting time, because, and of course there were a lot of naysayers back then as well.
Oh, yeah, a lot of naysayers, especially when he got into things like trying to set up the Goodwill Games, which was like the comparison of throwing the Olympics in Moscow, Russia and to do that within 6 weeks. So, yeah, it was kind of crazy, but he was a guy who I really respected because he surrounded himself with people that could get stuff done. And he just navigated regardless of obstacles. You know, he just didn't see the obstacles. So it was amazing.
How do you approach the creative process? Because the creative people that I know all seem to have a different way of going about it. So
how do you deal with something like that? What is your creative process?
Well, first of all, I come at it with a real open mind and a clean slate. And I'm not afraid of the process. I had a client once who, at the end of a project, we had a postmortem, and he said, Jackie, I have to confess that when we started this, I was really so nervous because I really had no idea where this was going. And I said, okay, then I'll make a confession too. I had no idea where this was going either, but I love that part of it. That's the part that's a thrill to me, and getting to understand what you do and getting to understand what's important to your customers and your clients. And mainly, I think the biggest part of the creative process is listening. So I'm a great listener, and I start out every project asking a lot of questions and asking a lot of questions because they're the subject matter expert. And I just really want to understand. I come at it so fresh that I try to pretend I've never heard of them, even if I have. And I put myself in the position of their customers, and I want to know what's important to them. So I ask a lot of questions, and I really try to get them to expose themselves and to be a little bit more vulnerable. And sometimes I ask them the same question, but in a different way over and over, and I'll finally get to something that isn't a pat answer. So, and that's something that's like a real golden nugget for me when I get to what the real new exciting crux of it is, something that they've maybe never thought of before, never seen in it that way before. So that's
so what do you mean by a golden nugget?
Well, a golden nugget to me are those things that are so core to the brand and so core to the personality. And people sometimes, when they're in business, forget what those things are because they're just operating day to day. And if I can get them to kind of let their guard down and tell me the real deal of what's going on in their company and what's really important to their clients or their customers, those are the real golden nuggets. And I just hear them. My customers, my clients tell me the answers and give me the answers to everything that I've ever done. They just don't know it, And so I really,
wow. I mean, but do you work only then with big clients, or can a small business work with you in such a way as to find their golden nuggets? Because I think maybe in a larger company, they've all worked on this and there's some meeting of the minds, where in a smaller company, they may not even know or appreciate what their golden nugget is.
Well, I'll tell you something. You would be very surprised how people in larger companies, a lot of them don't really even know that. And a lot of them have never discussed it on a level where they've actually been in a room where they had to come to an agreement on that. So that's interesting because I've been in meetings with Fortune 50 companies and asked them questions and gotten a variety of answers that aren't exactly in sync with one another. So it's sometimes having to bring those people to the table just for an agreement on what is important. What are those important answers?
Yeah, I can see that. Of course, with larger companies, I guess because they're so large and they're so hierarchical that one division doesn't talk to the other division, and
right.
Sometimes they operate just on rote.
Exactly, and sometimes they're operating under such pressure to get something done that they're not really even following any kind of a framework, any kind of a brand strategy. They're just like knee-jerk reaction. They have deadlines. They have to get certain things done. So I kind of like to bring it down to let's just take a deep breath and come to some agreement here before we move forward and make sure we're on the right track. And I love working with mid-size and smaller companies as well. And I even like working with solo, just companies of one. And I like to say I like to work for well-funded startups because I could be spending a lifetime working for non-funded startups that just go nowhere.
But what about a company? Let's just say a company, the person's, let's say, operating out of their home, or they have, just a very small office, and it is she or he, usually it's a she, is a solopreneur, mm-hmm. And so they're by themselves. How could they work with you?
I've actually done that for several clients. I won't exactly tell you who they are because some of them are designed to look like they're not just working one person in that office.
Which is what the ideal arrangement, of course, would be.
Right. So I'm not going to give away their secret. They come across
right,
looking,
I understand.
Like a little bigger entity than they are. But but that it really just depends on what are their goals. And sometimes it works to their advantage that they're just working by themselves, because then people get that one-on-one and that's what they're looking for. So it's really trying to understand what is in the customer's, and I'm not talking about my customers, I'm talking about their customers' best interests. What is that story that is going to touch them? So if the story that's going to touch them is, I really just want to work with a one-man shop and I'm going to get all their attention, then, and that's the kind of clients they're looking for, and that's the kind of clients they like working with, then that's the story, and that's the golden nugget. That's the brand.
So how do you arrive at what your client wants to communicate?
I have several questions that I ask them that I start by asking them, and then we usually end up heading off in a couple different directions until we rally. But eventually, we put together a framework, and we agree on a framework. So we agree on the why they do what they do. What is it that's their big that's their big why in regards to why their customers would want to work for them, would want to work with them or buy something from them. And the why is bigger than just the product itself or the service itself. The why is because I want to really help people understand something, or I really want my clients to have a leg up here, or an advantage in some way here, or whatever that real, and it's not exactly a mission, but it's really just the why I do it. And then you have to come to some agreement too about some of the principles, the ethics of that company are really critical, because the way you present a company that is, and you would think that all companies kind of share the same ethics, but they don't, because it could run the gamut from, we do this because we're altruistic and 100% of our profits we are going to donate to this non-for-profit, or we are a non-for-profit, all the way to, we're dog people. Whatever it takes to get the job done, we'll do it.
Wow.
So you would think that some of those principles would be the same for every company, but they're not. And then you have to also decide on what are the emotions that are going to move your customer. How do you want to relate emotionally, which is very different depending on what that company does and what that brand is. So the way that you would approach somebody who wants to have a babysitting operation is very different than somebody that owns a funeral service. Those emotions are very different. Where is your customer and where's your customer sitting in their life when they're looking to buy your product or your service? Who are these people? What is that emotional connection that they want to make with you? And I have a lot of clients, well, some clients, not a lot, but some clients who think that the more they say about the more things, the more they'll impress you. And that's the way to get clients, by just telling everything that they know to you. And the more that they tell you, then the more you'll realize they're an expert in this, and the more you'll trust them. When really, sometimes it's not really that important to say everything. It's not just that it's not important to say everything. It's not a good thing to say everything. Just figure out what the real essence of the emotions that you want to tap into, and the telling them why it's a good thing to work with you, why it's a good thing to.
So what happens when we meet, mm-hmm. and I'm telling you all about my business and what I want and what I'm hoping you'll give me, and you're thinking in a totally different direction. You're thinking I'm on the wrong track entirely. what do you do in those kinds of situations?
Um, those are kind of hard clients maybe to work with. Somebody who comes that it's thinking that it's going to be a little different than it is. Maybe they come thinking that they have all the answers. Usually I can detect that and turn that around during the process before I even give you a proposal. I talk to you on the phone for a long time before I give you a proposal to find out where you are and what kind of things are important. And I have a way to get to that information. So you don't come to me expecting to have all the answers at the beginning. And clients that have certain expectations or this is a little, clients who come to me aren't really looking for a graphic designer. They might think they are, but that's not what they find in me. And what I mean by that is when you hire a graphic designer, you're kind of looking for somebody to put the final steps on. You've already got your content developed and you've already got certain things developed and things in your mind of what you want to happen. And a graphic designer will make it look great. You know, they'll put the right tone on the images or whatever. When I work with a client, and P.S., a graphic designer will start the conversation with talking about color and font and point size and design elements. And I come to it very, very differently. I never talk about that stuff up front. So they're kind of a little thrown back, and I draw it to their attention that I'm not talking about those things specifically because we need to have some kind of a consensus on what we're trying to accomplish and a creative strategy on how to accomplish that. And all of those things will drive those decisions. So, you know, if you want to say that you're an exciting company that's going to dictate what the colors are and what the fonts are and how all those things eventually play out in a visual way, but I don't come to it from there. So a client that comes to me saying, I love blue, it's got to be blue. I'm going to go, let's see where we go before we make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I would think, I would certainly think that I would have biases, but I also would think if I'm hiring you, you must have some kind of creative talent that I don't have or I'm not aware of, and I would certainly listen to what you had to say. So what are the biggest challenges that you run into in terms of working with people?
I think what I was just saying, people who don't really, I think primarily people who haven't stopped to really think who their customers really are, people who have kind of pat answers to a lot of the things that the brand stories they've been telling themselves, and maybe they've outgrown those stories, or maybe they haven't found a new way to tell those stories. I think the most difficult and biggest challenges are people who just get locked into something, like it has to be a color, it has to be this color, it has to be this. And I think once you start to open their eyes I don't make design decision based on my personal, oh, I love that color, or that's a cool color, that's a great looking font. If it doesn't make sense for what you're trying to say, then no. Mm-mm.
It's so funny you say that, because I know when people talk about branding, for example, and things like that, it is so important to them in terms of color and this and that. And I don't even think about that. I mean, I know I have to eventually think about it, but I want to know the whole impact. I want to know, what is this thing that I need to do to set me apart from everybody else? And then let's worry about the colors and the design and everything else. So it's interesting to me that you say that, because I've heard that before, where people are just wedded to a particular color, and that's not the biggest issue. So,
push comes to shove, my client is the one that writes the check. So I will stand up for what I believe in, but at the end of the day, they're the ones who make the final decisions. And I've had clients who I believe made the wrong decisions.
Well, I believe that. So, but you do so many things, Jackie. I mean, gosh, I just, read off a whole line of things that you've done and that you do. So what is it that you spend most of your time doing now?
Most of my time right now is spent during kind of rebranding projects. So that might be a company that's really taking a good look at what they do and need to formulate their story a lot better, um, and how they tell their story and update that story and consolidate it a little bit better. And then the end results, as we walk down what actually gets done, the work is usually new corporate identity, so new logos and corporate identity systems and websites, and occasional print. And I still love doing print. So those are always fun projects. But I do a lot of web design and web production and corporate ID stuff.
So what is your design process?
So after we really come down to a brand framework and all those considerations that I'm looking at, then I start looking everywhere, looking at every single thing in my life. I make myself crazy, looking at every single thing in my life with a filter of your particular project in mind. So I'm thinking, oh, I like that little piece of that. That makes sense. And then I also keep a pad next to my bed all the time, because a lot of times right in that moment where you're starting to doze off, I come up with something and I get up and I make notes all over the place. And then I just have to keep evaluating those notes and those ideas and picking out the ones that I think are going to be the most successful. And I usually throw them in front of my client, a couple of them, give them a choice to talk through them and see which one sticks, which one really feels good, which one has the most legs, which one might be most adaptable to a lot of different formats and how we can use it in the future. So, and then I give them lots of design options. They usually select one that we can refine and just keep refining it till we're done.
Wow. I just, I admire people like you so much. I do keep a pad by my bed too, but that's because of all the things I think of that aren't so brilliant, and I write them down, because if I don't write them down, I'll forget them, But my creative bone is not the best. I mean, I'm really good on following through. I'm really good at knowing whether, yes, this is for me or it's not for me. But in terms of creativity, that's not my strong suit. So when I meet somebody like you, I think to myself, wow, that's amazing, And I think that's a real skill and a real talent. And I think that's fabulous. And I think what's also amazing and really interesting is the fact that when you first got started with Dear Ted Turner, he really gave you that opportunity to develop that, because he was not a hoverer. I mean, he wanted to make sure that everything was going the way it's supposed to go, but he gave you a pretty free rein to get things done. So you were able to develop that skill and talent that you had naturally, and you were given an opportunity to really let it go where it could go. So that was amazing in itself.
Absolutely. And it came at a very perfect point in my life, because I was single, and working at Turner was not a 9-to-5 Monday through Friday kind of a job. It was constant, and it became my family, and it was very, very seductive. There was a lot going on at the time. There was always exciting things to do. There were all these things out of left field that he would buy or think of, and then we just have to do it. And the people that worked for me, that worked with me in my department, were just so enthusiastic and so exciting. And I like to have a lot of fun when I work, and I like to laugh a lot, and I like to just bring a lot of joy into everything. And my experience at Turner was really joyful and wonderful and jam-packed. It was crazy. But
well, I think that's a whole thing of nurturing you. I mean, I think, and I think that's that world. I mean, it's just like mine is not a 9-to-5 world. I mean, I could make it a 9-to-5 world if I wanted to, but it's really not. Mm-mm. And it's like when I look at what's going on air. when there's an emergency. The newscasters are brought back in. People are substituting for other people. If there's a hurricane or if there's a fire, those people are on air 24/7. So it's a part of all of this. But I just think it's fantastic, the background that you have and what you do. I can just feel that you bring energy to everything that you're doing, and that's the key to having a great business. And so we have just a couple minutes left in this segment, and when we come back, I want to ask you a little bit about your personal life. And I don't want to dig deep, but so many women that I talk to, once they hit 50, they think that's it, and it's all over. And I know that's not you. So, so I want to make sure that we get a little bit about Jackie and what you like to do in your spare time and how you keep yourself energized and in sync with what's going on, because I think that's one of the most difficult things is keeping up with the technology today of everything that's going on, because a lot of what you do in the design process now is done, online and through technology, and you had to keep up with that, which I know is not always the easiest thing to do. So I want to say, well, let's hold off, and we'll find out when we come back, and we'll see what you have to say about Jackie having fun with what you're doing, because I think it makes a whole big difference on how you approach things and what happens, and the energy that you bring to the job that you have. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back with Jackie in just a few minutes.